This is the story of Charlie Mouse. Charlie Mouse was a cat who we took in December 2021 because we'd seen him around locally a lot, and it didn't look like he was particularly well looked after. He would always chase you home and trot along beside you, looking up you ever so hopefully and meowing at you and trying to say, hey, be my friend. And it got to a point where we weren't really sure if he had an owner. We weren't sure what was going on with him. We thought that he probably lived on the same road as us, which was a very main road. But I'd said to Paul, look, if we see that cat outside and in distress again, I'm having him in. We're trying to find out who owns him and we're going to sort this out. So come the day in question, I was in the house. Paul was going out shopping. He came flying back in the house and said, that little ginger and white cat's outside. He's in the road. I said, what do you mean in the road? He said, he's in the middle of the road, laying on the white line, shaking. Cars are driving round him. And I said, get him. Just get him. That was a massive, massive main road in the middle of the Rhondda. And it was lorries, cars, buses, boy races up and down. It was minutes before someone didn't bother and just went over him, and that was the end of it. And I couldn't deal with the thought of that. So he came in and he was a wreck and very scared and nervous, but he was, he jumped into my arms when Paul chased him out of the road, and we brought him in the house. We did look around. We put posts up to sort of say, we've taken in a cat, it's distressed. He hated the sound of motorbikes. He'd always freak out if a motorbike that was too loud went past the house. And he would also, and the only cat I know ever, to run away from a red laser dot, which was just bizarre. So we wondered if at some point had he been hit by a motorbike, he had a missing tooth. So we thought maybe it was all related. The sound of the bike, seeing the red tail light as the red dot moving away from him, was it all part of the trauma? We don't know. Anyway, so it was transparent that he was going to be with us for a while we try and find his owners and have a word with them and this, that and the other. We took him to a vet. They confirmed there was no microchip, so it's not like we could find someone easily. I posted on various lost and found cat groups. No one came forward. We did sort of, in the past, I'd been stroking him and his owners had passed us and said, that's our cat, and taken him off us. But we don't quite know what house they went into, so we never really found them. Asked around a few doors, no sign, nobody really knows what's going on. So we'd had him a couple of hours and we thought, well, we need to give him a name for the time being. And because he was ginger, we were like, oh, Garfield. Then we took one look at him and we were like, no, he's incredibly skinny. We can't call him Garfield, that's insane. But he didn't stop talking to us. So he became Charlie Says, as in the old Charlie Says, don't play with matches, if you're British and old enough to remember that. But then he was so vocal constantly. And all I kept thinking in my head was, from Bagpuss, there was one of the mice on the mouse organ was called Charlie Mouse. And so Charlie Mouse stuck. So our main nickname, although we'd officially called him Charlie Says, our nickname for him was Charlie Mouse. So yeah, we had him for a couple of years and he appeared very happy with us. He'd come and sit, not on us, he only ever sat on my lap once. The rest of the time it was sit alongside me with his paws crossed over my shins or my ankles. He would come and sleep on me. If I was laying, as I frequently do, sort of kind of on my front, he would lay on my back with his paws right up over my shoulder blade by my neck, and then kind of with his body alongside my spine until I would, invariably shift and then he'd jump off. And then his favourite game was to treat my feet, even if they weren't moving, under the blanket I sleep under, as if they were mice or something, or a toy moving, because he would pat, like, you know how if you move something around and the cat sort of pats after it, he'd do that with all his claws right into the tender parts of my foot. That was always a pleasure at night. Thanks, Charlie Mouse. But he became very, very quickly integrated into our family. And we loved him, and our other cats loved him, and he loved the other cats, and he'd play quite rough. So my boys, they're a bit wussy, so they don't really get involved. But Madam would play with him, and they'd pair them, would charge round the house, chasing each other, tapping each other on the nose, and they all got on like an absolute house on fire. Then we came to, towards the end of, after, just into the new year for 2024, and he stopped eating, which was unlike him. I mean, he was like 7 dinners a day, probably as a minimum. So I thought, well, this is odd, but he seemed to be hungry, but didn't fancy the food. So I started mashing it up with a fork, and then he'd eat that for a day. Then that wasn't enough, so I started making it a bit more runny, so it was more soupy, and he did that for a day. And then we had a day where he didn't eat for 24 hours, and I was like, right, get him to the vet. So we took him to the vet, and he was good as gold. He got out, he let him take his bloods, didn't bat an eyelid, didn't try and run, just sat there looking at them like, yeah, okay, I'm here, thanks, yeah, nice, thank you for doing that, bye. But because we'd had to go late in the evening, we weren't going to get the results back. That was a Wednesday night. They said they might come Friday, they might come Monday. He didn't live to see the Monday, sadly. The Thursday night and the Friday night, we fed him by syringe every 2 hours. We were shattered. We were absolutely shattered. But it came to the Saturday afternoon. I took one look at him under Paul's desk, and I said, I think it's time. It's time that we did the right thing and euthanized him. Euthanized him? Put him to sleep. It took Paul a couple of hours extra to come round, which I completely understand. I was making the decision absolutely with my head and not my heart. that was if it had been down to my heart, it would have suffered on. I know that's awful, but thankfully my head did overrule. Yeah, we looked at various vet options, and we ended up talking to people called Moby Vets. In the interim time, he'd stood up and he'd had pooed himself and had weed himself, had a little mess. He'd tried to stand up. We'd put a tray and a bowl of water right next to him, and his back legs just didn't work. He couldn't. He was trying to stand on them, and they were just nothing. I think for me that was the big sign. It was like when their legs go, it really is time. It's, that's if they're in that state. Moby Vet came out. They were wonderful. Can't say enough good things about the chap. He came out. He walked in. He took one look at Charlie. He looked at me and said, "I'm ever so sorry, sir, but your cat is dying." And as upsetting as that was, it also validated my decision. And so that kind of made that a little better, given the circumstances. He said, "Do you want me to inject him in," I'm sure he said kidneys or penis. And I was like, "Oh, good God, don't inject him there. I can't, on top of everything else, I can't do that to the kid." And he said, "Do you want to hold him?" And I couldn't. I just couldn't do it. And initially I turned away. And then at the very last moment, I thought, no, don't do this to Charlie. Don't make him go looking at you, and you've turned your back on him. I mean, awful now I think about it. So I turned round just in time to see the guy about to put the needle in, and Charlie lifted his little head off the blanket, looked me dead in the eye, and just gave me this really little, not pitiful, not sorrowful, just a very normal Charlie meow. I mean, I don't know, but it always felt a little bit to me like it was a "goodbye, I love you, thank you," which naturally absolutely broke me at the time. But the injection went in and he was gone like that. It was so... I've never seen a cat put down before. I was gobsmacked at the speed with which they go. And, great in some ways, because it's not like a slow going to sleep or anything like that. It's like he's there, he's gone. Paul was semi-holding him. He was laying on a blanket and Paul had his hand with him. That was it. That was Charlie over the Rainbow Bridge. Once the vet had left, the pair of us absolutely fell apart and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. As you'd expect, really. I buried him the following day in the garden. I bought an orange rose to go over his grave. It died. I thought, well, I've done that wrong. I bought a second one from a completely different supplier, slightly different type of rose. It died. So I'm beginning to think Charlie doesn't want flowers on his grave. Just a subtle hint. So that was it. So here we are a year on. It's taken me a long time to be able to make this video. I've thought about it a lot over the last year. It doesn't matter if nobody ever watches it. This is therapy for me, let's be honest. I mean, just 2 days ago, on the kind of annual anniversary to the day rather than the date, so the Saturday night, I looked at a picture of him and I absolutely fell apart and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed like I've not cried in, well, probably since the day it happened. I've been quite bitter about why did we only get 2 years with him? We had so much love for him and he had so much love for us. 2 years just doesn't seem fair. Paul often has to bring me down off of that and say, look, but we gave him 2 years. The last 2 years of his life were probably the happiest he ever knew because of us, and he loved us. And he did. And we loved him. And we always will. Charlie, do come back and visit us. We'll all be together again one day. I look forward to seeing you.